Okay, welcome back. What I have today is some more function worksheet or more function notes. This one is on function notation specifically. Kind of we did a little bit like the other video. All right, so my suggestion, if you have a printer, I have this notes in the agenda or in that same material spot with the agenda and video. Print that off so you can follow. If not, you're probably going to want to put some on your own paper before you start this video. Okay, so this is function notations. I have a printout for this. So for number 1, there's 6 parts, but we are going to use this function. F of x equals 3x minus 5. G of x equals x squared minus 5. And h of x equals 2x plus 7. So we have 2 linear functions and 1 quadratic. So for A, we're kind of review this before we do some new stuff. So A is asking for f of 3. So input 3 in for the x. What's happening to the x here? It looks like it's being multiplied by 3 and subtracted by 5. So it's 3 times 3 minus 5. I'll do the, how about I just set it up and we'll do the math in a minute. So 3 times 3 minus 5. So we're finding g of 4 and then multiplying that by 2. So plus 2. G of 4 should be 4 squared. 4 squared minus 5. That's multiplied by 2 here. Okay, so let's figure out, let's find f of 3. Should be 3 times 3 minus 5. 9 minus 5 is 4. Plus, figure out g of 4, put 4 in for x, it's being squared. So 4 squared minus 5, 16 minus 5 should be 11. Times that by 2. So 2 times 11. So 4 plus 22 should be 26. So f of 3 plus 2 times g of 4 should be 26 here. All right, so B. So what this is called is composition of functions. It says f of g of 3. So f of g of 3. So always work inside out. So start with the inside. So we know how to do this. We just were working on it yesterday's worksheet, just barely. Find g of 3 first. That's off to the side. I know I put a lot of stuff on this board. Let's find g of 3. So when your input is 3, you're putting 3 in for what's happening to x. It's being squared. So 3 squared should be 9. 9 minus 5 is 4. So it's 3 squared minus 5. So what is g of 3? It's 4. So let's input. So keep the f on the outside. And what is g of 3? Substitute it in. It's 4. So figure out the inside part first, and then find f of 4. So make sure you're looking at the outside function, then it's f. So you're putting 4 in for the x, that's your new input. So it'd be 3 times 4 minus 5. So 12 minus 5 should be 7. So we would say f of g of 3 would be 7. So figure out the inside first. What's g of 3? Make sure you look at the right function. 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 5 is 4. So you put 4 now in for the x in the f of x function. 3 times 4 minus 5 should be 7. Okay, let's try another one of those. We're finding 8 for C. It says f of h of negative 3. So do inside first. So look at the h function. You're putting negative 3 in for x. Make sure you see that it's being multiplied by 2 and then 7's being added to it. So let's find, I'll put the f out front. Let's figure out what h of negative 3 is. 2 times negative 3 plus 7. So 2 times negative 3, negative 6 plus 7 should be 1. So now we're finding f of 1. So put 1 in for x. That would be 3 times 1 minus 5 should be negative 2. So we could say up here that f of h of negative 3 should be negative 2. So figure out h of negative 3, which was 1, and then you're putting 1 in for f, or into the f of x function in for x. 3 times 1 minus 5 should be negative 2. All right, let's try another one of those. So it's g of f of 5. So f of 5. So inside first. Always do the inside. So I'll leave the g on the outside. And let's just substitute 5 in for x. So 3 times 5 minus 5, that's messy. 3 times 5, okay, so 3 times 5, 15, 15 minus 5 is 10. So now we're finding g of 10. So figure out what f of 5 is. In this case it's 10, so keep the g on the outside. So now we're finding g of 10. So put 10 in for x. So that would be 10 squared minus 5. So 100 minus 5 should be 95. So we'd say g of f of 5 should be 95. Okay, so E. It says find x if g of x is 19. So our x is our input. We don't know our input, but we know our output is 19. So what is g of x equal to? Well, it looks like g of x is x squared minus 5. So that has to equal to, so here you'd set up an equation, that would equal to 19. So g of x is x squared minus 5, and set that equal to 19. So here, solve for x, add 5, x squared equals 24, take the square root. So let's see, perfect squares, 4 and 6. So I could say that would x could equal to, remember when I took a square root, I put plus or minus, a plus or minus 2 root 6 would be our input. Okay, so if you know your output, set your function equal to that output. So for f, find x if g of x, so again, we're looking at g of x, is 44. So x squared minus 5 equals to 44. Okay, and then solve. Add 5, we get x squared equals to 49, and then the square root. X would equal plus or minus, what's the square root of 49? 7. So positive, and if it was just a linear equation, like if I said this would equal to, this function equal to, let's think of a number that would make it, like 10. If I said it equal to 10, then it would be just a linear function, add 5, 15 divided by 3 to be 5. So if it's not a square root, then you don't put the plus or minus in front. Okay, so that was for question 1. Number 2, I tried my very best to graph this, but you can follow along with the graph that's on your the note sheet that I gave you. So I have this is called j of x, this function. Okay, and then I have a. So if I know j of, basically you have j of -2, you want to then find the output. Your input is -2. Remember, it's always, like if this is my function j, so it's j of input equals output. Output. I can't spell right today. Output. Okay, so which is j of x would equal to your y. Always. Okay, so my input is x. So what is, my x is -2. All right, so when my x is -2, what is the y on that graph? It looks like the y is at 1. So we would say that from this graph, j of -2 is 1. So my input is 0. Input is 0. What's my output? I have to go down 3. So -3. My input is 3. My output, I can't tell from my graph. We'll come back to that one. For D, I think it was, what does it look like it is? I don't think it's a nice number. It's probably a decimal. We'll go -1.7, looks like. Okay, so let's look at when my input, okay, so this time, let's go back. So we have, my output is 1. So what is my input when my output is 1? Where's my output of 1? My output of 1 is right here. So when my output is 1, what was my input? My x would be -2. It's kind of back to that one right there. My input is -2, my output is 1. My output is 0. My output is 0. my output is 0, which would be over here. When y is 0, what's my input? My input would be 5. So it's not wanting to know when x is 0, it wants to know when my y is 0 is right there, when x is 5. So we would say j of 5 would be at 0. So it's kind of working backwards for that. Okay, so let's look at this. You're given this function for number 3. It's only asking for this part, but I'm going to go over a couple more as well. So it wants you to find f of g of 0. So first of all, again, remember you're finding the inside part first, g of 0. Well, when your input is 0, what's the output? Well, it's also 0. So really what it's finding is, well, what's f of 0? So when your input is 0, so we're looking, this is the g function, this is the f. So from g, if you input 0, you're still at 0. When you input 0, where are you at for the f function? You're at 5. So we would say that f of g of 0 is 5. So again, I'm going to have you try this one. F of g of 1. So find g of 1. So when your input is 1, what's the output on the g function? Looks like it's at -1. So I want you to find f of -1. So when your input is -1 on the f function, what are you at? I think it should be at 6. So we would say that f of g of 1 should be 6. Okay, let's try one more. F of g of -4. So g of -4. So when your input is -4, what's the output? Looks like it's at -2. So f of -2. When your input is -2, what's the output on the f function? Looks like it's at 9. So we would say that f of g of -4 is 9. Okay, so there's a worksheet that's just like this kind of to practice. Let me know if you need help at all. So I have another, the third thing for this week would just be to practice a Kahoot on function notation. All right, and just, I think you follow my code, and let me know if something doesn't work. Okay, I hope you have a great week.